Okay, this is the second part of the video lecture series for Punishment and Corrections, Bridge Valley Community and Technical College. More about illegal drugs. The drug threat, U.S. continued. This is the last slide that you saw with the first presentation, so this is our pickup point. Again, you want to take notes on this just as if you were in class. You'll be accountable for this stuff, so please take good notes on this. Now, although overall drug use has decreased, illegal drug use has increased among what we call high-risk juveniles. These are adolescent offenders, juvenile offenders who commit more violent crimes, especially more aggressive crimes, and have lengthier criminal histories already as juveniles. Illegal drug use is strongly linked to, go figure, juvenile criminality. Now, just for a second, we need to differentiate between use and abuse. Drug use can be kind of looked at in the following ways. It usually begins with not ever using, and then it gets to a point where someone experiments or tries it for the first time. Now, some people, juveniles or adults, can use illegal drugs once a year. I know some people who smoke marijuana recreationally, quote unquote, and they may only, and then they're not addicted to it. They don't feel like they have to have it. And I know some people who will, get drunk on alcohol maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Does this mean that they have an abuse problem or even a physiological or psychological dependence? Not necessarily. So when we talk about use, we're talking about experimental use, recreational use, even could be medical use. There are a lot of folks who will use alcohol to self-medicate for mental health or physical problems. I know a lot of people smoke marijuana for medical reasons, if not legally prescribed in states where you can obtain legally prescribed marijuana. They will obtain it illegally and smoke it just to fight pain, for example. Culturally endorsed use. Some religions promote the smoking of peyote, for example, and Native Americans, for example, as part of a religious practice. Now, adolescent drug use turns into abuse when it becomes dysfunctional. Now, I'm not condoning the use or experimentation of illegal drugs or alcohol. What I'm saying is purely in terms of defining, the problem and differentiating degree of difficulty suffered when using illegal drugs. We're talking about dysfunction when the juvenile or the person now has an inability to function on a daily basis. They can't attend school. They can't perform well. Maybe their grades go down or their attendance in certain classes goes down. They start to pursue dangerous and reckless behaviors, dangerous sexual activities. Maybe their driving is erratic. They make poor decisions. They put themselves and others in dangerous situations. Now we're looking at something that we could call abuse, or maybe even dependence. This dysfunction usually leads to a young person focusing his or her entire life on obtaining the drugs, maintaining them in his or her possession, and using them. Abuse can also lead to other negative outcomes such as arrest, incarceration, prosecution, and even early death. And again, I think this information is highly pertinent in this class because this class is all about punishment and corrections, and we're talking about incarcerating an extremely large amount of offenders in jails, in prisons, and in federal prisons. Like we just said, 52% of all federal prisoners are drug offenders. So it's a huge part of the incarceration picture. And I want you to think about, as we're talking about this, punishments that you think may or may not be appropriate for certain types of substance abusers. As we've already talked about this in class some already. Now, a few of the main types of illegal drugs. I don't want to go through all of them, but I want to hit the main ones. Alcohol. Obviously, alcohol is legally obtained at the age of 21, but it is dangerous because it relaxes inhibitions. People have a tendency to do things or feel like they can do things that otherwise they would not if they were not drinking alcohol. We know statistically adolescent use of alcohol is linked to fighting, property damage, academic problems, occupational or work problems, and obviously conflicts with law enforcement officials. Juveniles who have a strong history of alcohol consumption and abuse, they tend to get into more trouble with the legal system. Same with adults. So there's a definite link between alcohol abuse and criminality. Tobacco. Again, it's not illegal for adults. It does often begin in adolescence. It contributes to nearly 500,000 deaths every year. And we're seeing epidemic problems in middle and high schools all over the country. We've already talked a little bit about marijuana. We've discussed kind of the pros and cons, if you will, of the legalization of marijuana. We know that it is a mild hallucinogen. Smoking it in small amounts can lead to an early stimulation and then a subsequent feeling of drowsiness or even increase in appetite. People who smoke it in copious amounts or large amounts can experience distortions in auditory perceptions and distortions in visual perception as well. So, I mean, essentially, if you smoke enough of it, and it would take a lot, it can actually lead to hallucinations. Cocaine is making a comeback. It was big during the 1980s in this country. It's a powder derivative of the coca plant. It was introduced in the late 1800s and was thought to be able to be a drug to treat depression and fatigue and other mental health problems. But we soon learned that it was highly addictive, and then the government began control of this substance. And of course now it is illegal. Cocaine produces extreme mood elevation, elation, feelings of being on top of the world, being invincible, grandiose feelings. Grand means big, so people with grandiose feelings feel like they are all powerful. They could do wonderful, incredible things that they probably can't, which is a problem and dangerous. And also a heightened sense of physical power or physical prowess. Snorting is the most common method. IV use is the most powerful method. Then we get into meth. Meth does awful things to your body. You can go online very easily and find lots of before and after pictures of people who are abusing methamphetamine. It is a synthetic drug, which means it is produced, it is concocted, it doesn't just grow out of the ground. Highly addictive stimulant. We see epidemic problems with methamphetamine, especially in the last decade, last 15 years. We saw a spike in arrests, convictions, incarceration, and subsequent treatment for offenders who are abusing methamphetamine. In the U.S., almost 15 million Americans over the age of 12, that's roughly 6% of the entire population, report having used this drug at least once. Juvenile court judges report growing numbers of young people appearing in court due to them not just using it but manufacturing and selling this drug, which is kind of frightening if you ask me. Let's go ahead and call that the end of the second part here. Thank you.